How much do you need to retire? This question is the big one. Everything you do from tax efficiency optimization, investment vehicle choice, and withdrawal timing really is based around getting you to the annual income that you need in retirement. But it's not that simple. And let's be honest, although there may be some tweaking, most of us could throw out a pretty accurate figure of what amount of income we'll likely need in retirement to live the life we want, but we'll be drawing this money from assets, most commonly our pension pot. So how much do we need in those assets to actually generate this income? That's what we're going to cover today. So I can't tell you what income you need in retirement. That will of course vary depending on your personal circumstances. But a figure I often see quoted as a general goal is around 40k. So in this video, I'm going to show you how much you need in assets to retire with 40 grand per year in today's money. That means 40 grand per year, which rises in line with inflation, which we'll assume is the average of 2.5% each year. We're also going to assume that we're age 60 and have a mortality age of 90, so a 30-year retirement, fairly standard. So let's start by tackling some of the more commonly discussed blanket methods for working this out. Many believe that taking the total value of your assets and multiplying it by the average market return expected gives you an appropriate withdrawal rate for the rest of retirement. Well, the average return for this portfolio, for example, of 40% bonds and 60% large cap stocks is 8%. That means to achieve 40 grand per year, we'd theoretically need a pension pot of 500 grand to fund this, right? Well, take a look at this. This is called a Monte Carlo simulation. It randomizes returns over the course of the plan in hundreds of different variations and provides a percentage chance of us hitting our 40k per year goal. In this case, as you can see, we have just a 4% chance of this actually happening and us achieving our 40 grand per year goal. So what's going on? Well, to start, we're not really looking to withdraw 40 grand per year. We're looking to withdraw 40 grand per year in today's monetary value. That means that we need to factor inflation into our calculation. So although an 8% growth rate exists, we can offset that by the assumed rate of annual inflation, in our case being 2.5%, which brings our real return down to 5.5% a year. Going back to our calculation, this would mean that a pension pot of around £727,273 would be needed to hit our 40 grand a year target based on our net growth rate of 5.5%. So going back to the Monte Carlo simulation, we can see our probability of success has increased significantly to 62%. A huge improvement on our 500k pot, but I don't think anyone would be particularly comfortable being given a plan with close to a 40% chance of failing. Certainly not something I'd be comfortable providing to a client. But why is this happening? Because the maths here checks out. Well, while 8% may be the average market return we receive, or 5.5% net of inflation, this is obviously not always going to be the case. And the near 40% of times that this plan fails is largely due to the timing of returns. As I'm sure you know, there are going to be years above this 8% growth rate and years below this rate. That's just how equity investing tends to work. But what if I told you that the first 5 years of retirement, so 60 to 65, where your pool of assets is at its largest because you haven't drawn down from them yet, you would see a consistent negative growth in the market. And you would see the biggest gains or positive growth towards the end of retirement, where inherently the pool of assets that would benefit from this growth would be much smaller due to you having drawn down from your pot over the last couple of decades. Well, you'd be in trouble because negative returns at the start of your retirement, let's say negative 8%, would in our case cause a £40,000 decrease to our pension pot, and a huge 20% positive return towards the end of our retirement, where let's say we have an 150 grand pension pot left, would provide just a 30 grand increase to our pot. So that's a large part of what this Monte Carlo projection tries to capture, and that's why you're seeing a fairly high level of failure rate here. Here's a good way of visualizing it using some backtesting. This simulation shows all of the deviation from the mean return of the FTSE All-Share Index between 1900 and 2022. All of the green you see here is either an increase or decrease compared to the mean over this period in a given year. This simulation maps these deviations as a percentile value onto our plan's assumed returns of 8%. This of course isn't perfect, we're not even 100% invested into equity positions, but using backtesting like this is always a good way to effectively show you what could happen to your plan based on recent historical return fluctuations. So you can see if we take the period of 1992 to 2022, our plan still worked and we hit our goal of 40k a year. And take 1935 to 1965, however, and our plan falls short as indicated by the red bars from age 88 onwards. The point I'm trying to hammer home here is just how impactful the timing of returns can be when evaluating how much you need upon retirement to generate desired levels of income. But look, this approach of just applying an assumed rate of return to your pool of assets is overly simplistic anyway, and hopefully not one that any financial planner uses for you. So let's talk about the 4% rule instead. This is another widely used strategy to work out how much you need in assets to generate sustainable income in retirement. As the name suggests, this rule claims that a 4% withdrawal rate from your assets will sustain a level of income that can withstand even hugely negative periods of market growth. So in our case, we'll be needing a pension pot of £1 million to generate our £40,000 per year income. So let's see what this looks like on our Monte Carlo simulation. As you can see, we are now sitting at a 94% success rate. So this size pension pot very comfortably provides this income, as I'm sure many of you expected. Now this would, in all likelihood, leave you with a lot of excess assets upon death, and in my opinion, is very conservative. And a pot of this size would likely facilitate a high withdrawal rate with no problem at all. So let's take a step back and make our scenario a little bit more realistic by assuming we're going to receive a full state pension from age 67 onwards, and accepting a success rate on our Monte Carlo simulation of around 85 to 90%. The state pension here is of course going to lighten the load on the required drawdowns each year from our pension pot. And I appreciate this muddies the water a little more, but I think it's a common enough scenario to the point that adding it into our mix here provides better context for most of my viewers who are likely to receive the full state pension. So with state pension included, we can actually achieve an 85% success rate in our Monte Carlo simulation with a pension pot of just 710 grand. So a 290k decrease from that £1 million value suggested by the 4% rule. This of course is a far more reasonable pot size to achieve this level of annual income and equates to an initial withdrawal rate of around 5.6% of our pot. And look, the reality is there are going to be a ton more variables that you need to factor in here. Things like availability of other sources of income like rental property or part-time work, the fact that in all likelihood, if 40k a year is what you feel like you need to live off now, this will likely change significantly as you age. And even things like one-off large purchases throughout retirement, which is very common. These factors, and honestly much more than you would initially think, need to all be considered in order to map out how much you truly need in assets to retire with X amount of income per year. But my hope for this video, as well as providing you with some general guidelines around our examples of 40k, is that hard rules like the 4% rule are far too simplistic, and I would caution anyone to rely on it more than just an initial back of the napkin calculation to get you started. Of course, a quick plug here, this is where having a financial planner really provides value. So if you're interested in working with me directly in any capacity, you can book in a paid strategy session with me through the Calendly link in the description, or alternatively just shoot me over an email with any questions you have using the email address just below this. There's also a link to join my free newsletter in the description where I share free resources and tips. I plan on getting the first email out for this in the next couple of weeks, and I think there's something in there for everyone, so please consider signing up. Of course, a big part of this approach is being tax efficient. Saving tax on your withdrawals in retirement is the #1 guaranteed way to improve your finances in retirement. I've made a lot of videos with tips on tax efficiency, but one I recently made that I think everyone should watch is all about where to pull funds from first in retirement and what order to draw down from your assets. So if you're interested, please give it a watch here. Anyway, thank you all so much for watching. If you found this interesting, please consider giving it a like, and I'll see you all in the next one.